Continuing education for nurses' assistants.
Introduction to legal and ethical issues. Laws, ethics, and behavior. Factors that influence behavior. Society's laws, governing authority, personal ethical code, moral sense, values instilled by the family, and spiritual beliefs. Patients' and residents' rights. Patients' rights. Revision of Patients' Bill of Rights by American Hospital Association. 12 points in patient care partnership. Patients' rights and responsibilities in the bill. Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights in 1973 has been revised and now is a partnership and developed to protect patients receiving care. Patients have the right to receive considerate, respectful care. They have the right to privacy, HIPAA. They have the right to make decisions about treatment, privacy, review their records, and have them interpreted. They have the right to be offered alternative care, participate in experimental research, or decline research. They have the right to be offered options to health care. Continued rights. They have the right to share a room with a spouse, right to privacy during a phone call, right to have visitors, receive mail, refuse treatment, to vote, to be free of discrimination, be treated with dignity, the right to be involved in their own health care, and they have the right to have preferences and be accommodated. After discharge rights. Patient care partnership. Patients have the right to be informed of options of care. Patients have the right to know how the hospital settles disputes and options for payments. The patient is responsible for cooperating with the health care providers. Residents' rights. Guidelines as part of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, OBRA, Long-Term Care Residents' Rights. There are 16 points in the residents' rights, and they include the right to work for the facility. However, it must be for pay or on a voluntary basis. The resident cannot work in exchange for services. The purpose of the rights. Sets legal and ethical standards, creates an atmosphere for open communication, and protects the rights of residents. Concerns for long-term care. Advocacy acts to support residents because they are a vulnerable population. They're easily abused and mistreated. Ombudsmen regularly visit the skilled nursing facilities, speak on behalf of the patient. They may be a volunteer or they may be paid. Nurses and teachers may be an advocate. They resolve problems and act by contacting other agencies. For instance, licensing. OBRA requirements ensure that the nurses and healthcare workers behave according to the legal and ethical standards. Skilled nursing facilities are required to post numbers to report complaints and also required to post numbers for the ombudsman. The nurse's aide should know where the number is posted. Guidelines concerning rights of residents in long-term facilities. Skilled nursing facilities have strict guidelines developed by the federal government. If the guidelines in a skilled nursing facility are not followed, funds may be cut and the facility may have problems receiving federal payment for Medicare. In the interest of providing the best possible patient and resident care, the AHA identifies some basic rights and responsibilities of all patients. Which of the following was a basic goal of this action? A. Improve health care. B. Create an atmosphere of open communication. C. Eliminate all waste of resources and time. D. All of the above. Answer B. Create an atmosphere of open communication. Guidelines have been established to create an atmosphere of open communication among everyone who is involved in patient care and to protect the patients who receive our care. Advanced directives. Decision-making capacity is the ability to make thoughtful decisions based on an understanding of the risks and benefits related to the decision. An unconscious or cognitively impaired patient unable to make decisions. A document that allows an individual to make decisions and let others know what the decisions are. And
a legal binding document.
Advance directive would be beneficial for a person that was newly diagnosed with dementia. An advance directive allows the patient's wishes to be known before the client's health and cognition declines.
Advance directive documents that allow a person to make his or her wishes concerning healthcare known to family, friends, and healthcare providers. Advance directives help preserve the patient's rights to make an informed healthcare decision. Durable power of attorney for healthcare. The authority to make healthcare decisions is transferred to a healthcare agent in times when the patient's decision-making abilities are impaired. A living will allows the patient to make their wishes known and concerns at the end of life medical treatment. Advance directives are only important for the elderly. True or false? False. All adults should consider having an advance directives and living will filled out and give copies to the family members they choose. In a situation where there's a tragic accident might leave any adult in a compromised situation, providing the family with this information will help ensure that the individual's wish is followed. Legal aspects of health care.
Laws. Rules are made by a controlling authority such as the state or federal government. Types of laws. Civil law, concerned with the relationship between individuals. Criminal law, concerned with the relationship between an individual and society. Litigation is a legal action taken against a person breaking the law. Liability, responsibility of an individual to act within the confines of the law.
Law. Litigation means legal action taken against a person breaking the law. You would see that on TV, for instance, in Judge Judy. Liability is the responsibility of an individual to act within the confines of the law.
Legal violations.
Types of tort. Civil law. Unintentional tort without intent to cause harm. A person who commits unintentional tort is considered negligent. Negligence committed by people licensed to practice in their own profession is called malpractice. Intentional tort with intent to cause harm includes defamation.
Tort. Intentional tort means with intent to cause harm. It includes defamation, assault, battery, fraud, false imprisonment, invasion of privacy, and larceny. For example, at Porterville Developmental Center, a night shift staff member just started their shift and placed a client in a wheelchair with a seatbelt and tray and left the room with the client in it around the midnight hour. The client slipped down in the chair, causing strangulation from the tray. The staff was arrested for murder.
Malpractice. Negligence committed by people that are licensed to practice their profession is called malpractice. A nursing assistant cannot be charged with malpractice.
Violations of civil law. Defamation, making untrue statements. Slander, oral form. Libel, written form. Larceny, stealing. Violations of civil law. Assault, threatening or attempting to touch a person without their consent. It can also be based on an angry statement or gesture. Battery is defined as touching a person without his or her consent. You need to obtain informed consent. And also a person can change their mind about informed consent.
Abuse. Violations of criminal act. The repetitive and deliberate inflicting of injury on another person. Punishable by a court of law. Abuse can be defined by actively doing something to another person or by failing to do something for another person, such as provide adequate care or attention. The injury can be physical or emotional. How would you define these incidents? Neglect, abuse, criminal? These are 4 true life incidents. First example, a nurse at a state developmental center failed to give a G-tube feeding throughout most of her shift because she did not want to change her client's briefs. Second example, a licensed nurse had a crush on a developmentally disabled client. She called him on the patient phone and flirted until caught. Third incident, a newly hired janitor had sexual relations in the patient bathroom with a mentally ill patient who became pregnant. And lastly, a licensed staff while working at a state hospital let a mentally ill individual escape and later on moved in with the patient. Continuation of actual incidents. A social worker employed by a state institute posted a client's personal information on Facebook. An RN's first day at work, employed in the emergency room, was found passed out with a needle in her arm, overdosed. Last example. The nurse's assistant failed to turn and reposition the resident. The resident suffered with pressure sores and passed away from sepsis. Violations of civil law. Fraud, deception that could cause harm, misrepresents professional qualities, false imprisonment, confining another person against his or her will, improper use of restraints. Violations of civil law. Invasion of privacy, violating another person's right to keep certain information and aspects of self away from others. Confidentiality, keeping information to self. HIPAA, federal privacy regulations, involves both at work and away from work.
Violations of criminal law. Abuse 1. Abuse is a repetitive and deliberate infliction of injury on another person, a willful act. Actively doing something or failing to do something, failing to feed, failing to perform hygiene, etc., is a form of abuse. Physical abuse, for example, force feeding. Neglect, failing to provide basic needs, for instance, not answering a call bell. Violations of criminal law. Abuse. Neglect or abandonment, failing to accept help from another staff, leaving the unit without telling anyone. Psychological abuse is involuntary seclusion, giving the person the silent treatment, treating the person like a child, or humiliating and bullying the person. Sexual abuse, making inappropriate remarks, nudity, unwanted touching, showing the patient inappropriate photography. Financial abuse, stealing money, forging signatures, blackmailing for money. Violations of criminal law. Abuse 2. Perpetrators of abuse. Elder abuse goes unreported frequently as seniors are a vulnerable population. Risk factors. Residents, patients that are demanding, loud, difficult, or combative are at the highest risk for abuse. Reporting abuse. Role of the nursing assistant in reporting abuse. Reporting abuse. All suspected abuse is reported. The time, the names, and or the description of the perpetrators are required in the report. Report changes in the resident's patient's behavior, as it could be evidence of abuse. Nursing assistants are sometimes hesitant to report as they do not want to get their peers in trouble. However, if you fail to report a witness or suspected abuse, you can be held liable for not reporting the situation. Question 3. It is important for nursing assistants to be aware of what is happening on the job. If a nursing assistant suspects a crime has occurred, what should you do? A. Ignore it because the nurse will handle it. B. Call 911 and report it. C. Report it according to your organization's policies and guidelines. D. Secretly record activity to prove the allegation when you report it.
C. Report it according to your organization's policies and guidelines. Your facility or agency will have specific policies regarding the chain of reporting such incidents. It is not your responsibility to investigate whether or not something has actually occurred or who has caused it. Just report the facts as you know them. Ethics, guidelines for behavior. Ethics, moral principles or standards that govern conduct. Professional ethics, code stated by American Nurses Association. Beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, fidelity, autonomy, confidentiality. Personal ethics, derived from values. A value, cherished belief or principle.
Code of Ethics. Treat patients and residents with respect for their individual needs and values. Respect the patient's or resident's right to choice and regard to the individual's right to control his or her own care. Hold confidential all information about patients and residents learned in the healthcare setting. Be guided by consideration for the dignity of patients and residents. Justice means treat each person equally, fairly, and respectfully. Fulfill the obligation to provide competent care to the patients and residents.
Avoiding legal and ethical dilemmas. Protecting yourself. Legal responsibilities and obligations. Familiar with your employer's policies. Know your job description. Know your state's limits of practice. Talk with your supervisor. Question 4. Each person's value system is unique and should be respected and considered when planning their health care. True or false? True. Each person's value system is unique. Respect for the individuals is one of the principles that forms the basis of the code and ethics of nursing. The end.